can support this important event by volunteering and by shopping. See Kathleen Shoemaker or Evelyn Newber in Social Hall, or consult the newsletter for details. And next Sunday, Soup Lunch returns. Sponsored by the Sunday morning team, we are looking for folks to donate soup, bread, butter, and desserts. You can drop off your items before the service and then stay and enjoy lunch and fellowship after the service. And after, we gather in the Memorial Garden for the dedication of the new memorial bricks. And finally, on Sunday next, in the afternoon, we have Sundays at 4 concert, all Beethoven recital, featuring music director Christopher Grundy, associate music director William Braun, cellist Julie Rubinski, violinist Artis Simerson, and Bert Convey. And now I ask Sally Connolly to come up and give us a loved talk.
Roy. Good morning.
Morning.
I need a good morning, you know. It is a beautiful morning. I am Sally, and I use the pronouns she and her. With me are a few members of your Connect core team. Connect is a collective of 40 churches, synagogues, mosques, temples, and civic organizations from Fairfield and New Haven counties that have joined together to take action on social and economic justice issues of common concern. We are interracial, interfaith, and come from diverse economic backgrounds, and USNH is a strong, active member. Next Sunday afternoon in Bridgeport, Connecticut, Connect will hold its fall assembly entitled Holding Faith, Holding Democracy, and it promises to be inspirational and celebratory. And I want to say, in these dire times, we need more democracy. After huge delays due to tech problems and major glitches, Clean Slate has finally become operational. This means that the criminal records of people with low-level felonies are being expunged. Their records are going. Yes. So, if you clap, you use up my time. So far, 13,000 people have had their records erased, and it is anticipated that about 75,000 more records will be wiped clean. These prior convictions have been huge impediments to getting a job, furthering education, and obtaining housing. Connect was absolutely critical to this extraordinary victory. All of us should be very proud of what's been accomplished. Years ago, my husband killed herself using her husband's service weapon. It didn't have to happen. Appropriate safety devices on firearms can often prevent suicide, accidental homicides, and stolen guns. Our Roy Anastasio chairs Connect's gun violence prevention team that works with the National Gun Safety Consortium. They are advancing the cause of gun safety by building a market for the latest high-tech safety tools, starting with law enforcement. It's impressive that your Connect team has recruited 13 Connecticut police departments to test and evaluate safety devices, more than any other state. This success and the value of safety devices will be highlighted at the assembly. Thank you, Roy.
Thank you, team.
She has done so much. And close at home, with organizing support from Connect, the Hamden Newhall Neighborhood Association celebrated a major victory as they successfully convinced Hamden's Legislative Council to approve an allocation of $60.4 million to repair deteriorating foundations in the Newhall neighborhood. We're very proud of all this, and we would love it if you would come schmooze with us after the service to find out how your Connect is involved in issues like affordable housing and supporting the immigrant community. Plus, you can register to attend the assembly next Sunday. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And then you can all come back at 4 for Sundays at 4.
Good morning. My name is Jonathan Dean. I'm your ministerial intern. I use the pronouns he, them. Please join me as we begin our worship with our call to worship. The call to worship today is by Ben Sewell, Days of Awe. We feel the season turning, the early sunset glancing through the red-tinged leaves, the newspapers arriving in the cool morning air, the flock of migrating swallows, a feeling of being on the edge of something new. These are the days of awe. A time to welcome a new year and a time to make the old year right before we lay it in its place on the shelf of our memories. We bless the wine we drink. We bless the braided bread and eat. We dip apple in honey and savor its sweetness. May the sound of the shofar carry us across the threshold where lie the possibilities we imagine for ourselves and for our children. And now, as we prepare to sing our hymn 323 in our gray hymnal, if you have a joy or concern, please feel free to come forward and drop a shell if you have a concern into the water. And if you have a joy or celebration, please feel free to come and light a candle to illuminate it, and so we can celebrate it with you. Please join in singing and rise if you are able and willing. 323, Break Not the Circle.
Good morning, my friends. Shana Tova. Happy New Year. Listening to the sound of the shofar this morning, which is really a sound that's meant to snap us out of our reverie, snap us into attention to all that this last year has been, all the hardship, all the joy that we're holding, and clear the slate. Allow us to be ready for whatever it is that's yet to come. It's a joyful sound, but it is a sound of awakening. I awoke this morning with one thought on my mind, as I know that we are addressing the idea of forgiveness today. The one thought that was in my mind is that no matter where I look, no matter what I observe, I truly link forgiveness to the idea that everything, every hurt that we do to someone else, and every hurt that we experience ourselves, is inextricably tied to ego. What I mean by that is that we are hardwired, our brains are hardwired to put ourselves on a different level from everyone around us. Sometimes we hold on to a deep sense that we are less than someone else. And that can lead to lashing out and hurting and feeling hurt. And sometimes we believe ourselves in some ways, our needs, to be above, more than those of other people. And that can lead to hurting others or feeling particularly hurt by the actions of others. The number one takeaway that I have had over the course of my life from my Unitarian Universalism is that simple idea that we begin our religious and our spiritual journey with, the idea that every human life, and in fact every life, has worth and dignity, is so simple and so complicated. It is a lifetime's journey of figuring out how that works in our world. Because to truly see my life as exactly the same value as every other life around me, having that worth, that dignity, is a lifetime journey. And it starts small. It starts with recognizing the ways in which ego is either making me feel more or less than others around me. I'll give you one example, one awakening moment, one internal shofar moment that I had from my early years. When I first got my driver's license and took my father's truck out on the road, I, through absolutely every fault of my own, was late coming home one day. He had asked me to have the truck back by 4 p.m. It was about 3:51. And he was very serious about having it back by 4 o'clock. And there I was at the start of Ridge Road, I'll say going the speed limit. And I got out onto that section of Ridge Road where there's a whole bunch of hills and bumps and swerves, basically the whole street. And in front of me, there was, and I still remember this to this day, there was this brown Oldsmobile. And it was crawling along the road at about 14 miles per hour. And my thought was, you are going to make me late. And I sunk deep into that thought and thought many things that I'm not going to say out loud here about them, that person who was crawling along this road, making me late. The audacity of that person, how could they not see that I needed to be home by 4 o'clock? And this feeling of anger, ire, rose up within me, and it was all directed externally at that person. And we crawled along the road, twisting and turning until we both went up my driveway. Hi, Grandma. It's so nice to see you. How's your day been? So there it was, that awakening moment, that whatever I was carrying was really about me. It was about me placing my value above another person. It was about me being worried about my own mistake, my own lateness, and how much of that anger boiled over onto another person. And sometimes you've heard people say, I try to think about things as if maybe that other person is someone is a loved one of mine. In this case, of course, it absolutely was. And so from that moment forward, I've tried to carry that feeling. Maybe that other person that I'm directing anger towards could be a loved one, because you never know. It just might be your grandma, or your grandchild, or just another human being, another living being that has worth and dignity and is equal to us in every way. Let us sing our children on to their classes this morning with words that are in your order of service. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the Spirit of God surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the Spirit of God surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
Covenant lies at the center of how Unitarian Universalists gather in community. We are united not by a particular set of beliefs, but by the promises we make about how we will be together, how we will treat each other, and how we will seek to mend relationships when we fall short of our aspirations. Each week, we recite together a brief version of our covenant. I encourage you to read the full covenant on our website, while the following words express our intentions in writing. Our true covenant lives and breathes in our actions. Please join me now in reciting the words that appear in your order of service or in the chat on the live stream. We covenant together to create and nurture a culture of respect and kindness, and to engage in the spiritual and everyday practice of loving more generously. To this end, we will strive to be open, value differences, listen deeply, use kind language, speak our truths, work with conflict, seek humor and joy.
Prepare, reflect, prepare. Please settle into your chosen posture of meditation, reflection, or prayer. We will start by taking a breath in and out. In and out. In and out. In and out. Let us spend some time in silent reflection on the following: contemplating and preparing for forgiveness. Spirit of love and life, known by many names and yet fully known by none. We give thanks for this time and this place of renewal. We give thanks for the ability to reflect and contemplate. Grant us the courage to continue our personal journeys, the courage to consider forgiveness for ourselves or for others. May we forgive each other when our courage falls short. And if we cannot at this time, we are gentle with ourselves. We have faith and hopefulness that our journey might deliver us towards the path of forgiveness. Let this be so, as we all say, amen.
Please join me in the responsive reading, number 637 in the Gray Hymnal. 637. A litany of atonement. For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again. For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again. For each time that we have struck out in anger without just cause. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again. For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others. For the selfishness which sets us apart and alone. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again. For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again. For losing sight of our unity. For those and for so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again.
Thank you, Gene. When Becky Friedkin and I sat down for an Indian lunch to talk about what kind of sermon would she like, because she bought the auction sermon, which I think is very generous of her. And if it doesn't go well this morning, she gets to exercise the power of forgiveness. So it's kind of a win-win, you know? And thank you. We had so many topics we talked about, but at the end of the lunch, we kind of just looked at each other, and I think you said the very simple phrase, what about just forgiveness? And that made a lot of sense. It is a fathomless and vast topic. I could have picked 1,000 different ramifications, ways in which forgiveness floats through our lives and sometimes is just beyond the edge of our capacity. What if someone that we need to forgive is no longer alive? What if, in fact, we can't forgive ourselves? You know, there were literally 100 possibilities here, roads that I couldn't take. But I do want to talk about forgiveness in both a very personal way and also in a public way, because ultimately we get to the cosmic way. And we Unitarian Universalists are not totally, completely, comfortably on board all the time of talking about the holy, and yet I think you and I are keenly aware that the power of forgiveness which we have to draw on to fulfill this essential life task, it just doesn't completely come from our own resources, because it asked so much of us and too much of us. And yet, if we can get there, if forgiveness enters our life, affects a relationship, I think we're all aware that that is not our own personal victory. It isn't even a victory at all. I think ultimately it's a sinking deep into a latent power that we all may draw on, that is always present. But I will not disguise the fact that I called this sermon at first the fragile art, and I could have just as easily called it the impossible task. Because sometimes I think religious institutions talk about forgiveness a lot and exercise liturgies like the blowing of the shofar. Because Jesse's right, we kind of have to be shocked awake to be able to do what sometimes feels absolutely impossible. So when Becky and I talked, at least I did not give any reference to the fact that this sermon would be coming in the midst of the 10 days of awe between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, where with fasting and prayer and repentance and atonement, you reach that place of awe. And that's how I think of forgiveness. I think of it with a great sense of awe. I have been blessed by it. I've had moments in my life where I've exercised it, and there have been moments in my life where I could not quite get there. But most of all, today, I think about the 4 congregations that I have served, and there are literally hundreds of people that I have stood with, stood among, had the honor of serving, and also the times that I let them down. So to do ministry at all means to be very keenly aware that without forgiveness it just doesn't work. Because life is too short, and energy and imagination are too short. And yet the love happens. So here we stand in the midst of those days of awe, and it's certainly more than the ending of one year and the beginning of another. I think we're touching an ancient tradition that allows us to live the rest of our life with some sense of peace and honor. Nor could we have possibly imagined that the nation itself would be forced to contemplate a 6-hour extravaganza / funeral of white Christian nationalism verging on hate, touched in a sublime moment where a widow spoke of forgiving her husband's murderer out of love. It was almost right in front of our very eyes in our public life, that contest between human nature and what is beyond the human and yet must be lived in real relationships. To forgive that act out of love. So this sermon's a little bit different. I do begin with a quote from last week's sermon on Confucius. I didn't squeeze it in there because I knew that it would work better today. But it's the last quote I'm going to give you today. Confucius said, "To not forgive others is to tear down a bridge that you yourself may have to walk." I'm not at all uneasy about the fact that this opportunity to stand at this pulpit and to preach to you means that I get to summon up any wisdom anywhere I can find it. And so, yes, I often have quotes and stories and parables and scriptures. I do that, but not today. Today is more simple. It's more straightforward. It's about that fragile art, as I have understood it, as I have seen it, as I have felt it. To take a different path and a different tone. And I want to tell you why forgiveness matters. And how arduous the path that we take to have it touch our lives. And why do I call it the fragile art? Because forgiveness is extraordinarily hard. That's why, for me, it lies at the very heart of my understanding of what spirituality is. Because without forgiveness, not much else can happen. And I'll talk about that much more today. And forgiveness and its difficulty, it kind of hovers above us as a place that we struggle to make real, because it doesn't work unless it's real. And I don't think any of us this morning have to work terribly hard to remember some moment where we absolutely hungered to be forgiven, or some moment where we felt that we were beyond the bounds of forgiveness, or the shattering relief and release when we were forgiven. Or when we reached deep and found that mysterious resource that moved through us into another life, to allow an action that seemed so utterly impossible and improbable. I'm not trying to take you merely down memory lane, or worse yet, trigger you, but I don't want that, but I do understand that in speaking these words in this hour, we are unlocking together an openness to our future days, to opportunities that still lie before us, awaiting us to understand why this undergirds all of our spiritual life. Forgiveness matters. And when it feels daunting, that is when it is most important. When we say, it's beyond me, I can't go there, what you did or what I did puts me beyond the place where absolution can possibly come, then the question is that true? And why would it matter if this were true and absolution did not come? If we couldn't answer the question that I asked last week in the sermon, what about reciprocity? That Confucius asked over and over. In the spiritual realm, the measure of difficulty is a mark of its central importance. The harder it is, the more it lies at the heart of who we are. No one should ever tell you otherwise. They wouldn't be treating you seriously if they did. And that's ultimately why community matters, and friendship, and mentoring, and counseling, and relationships of all sorts. You are responsible for this moral action in your life. But you never go alone. You don't. There is always a mutual bond of respect and community and love that can go with you on this most arduous path. And this morning I'm going to share some very simple ideas. And I do not pretend that they aren't extraordinarily difficult, or that I can easily exercise them and watch them unfold in my own life, because that would not be true either. But there are things that I have seen, stories I have watched, and it has taught me that I'm not wrong in believing that forgiveness may not only be helpful and hopeful, that in the end, it is worth every price you can pay. In a world of brutality and casual callousness, yes, of Sudan and Gaza and Ukraine, there are warring realities that seem so piled high with the impermissible and the seemingly unforgivable that we all understand that this is not an easy life. It just isn't. And yet history is replete with societies that have refused to double down and go into the labyrinth and succumb to the allure of hatred. That they have risen up. They have abandoned the eye for an eye across generations, because history also shows us that there are societies, I would call it the Mandela Principle, that have brought about rapprochement, a compact of peace, which is only possible by a stunning assertion of forgiveness that all the hatreds and all the violence, it is not forgotten, but it is forgiven. And this is a visionary thing that exhausted populations can find the capacity to do. We have seen it in our own lifetimes. And if this is true, at that political way, how can it not be true in a personal way? The setting down of long hatreds. So if societies can do it, so can cities and towns, and so can rural communities and hamlets, and so can families, and so can you and I. What you and I, when we find that we are being driven apart, I think we can understand that if we see this at this larger level, that there is a capacity to touch it in our own experience. Many years ago, I remember one evening where a member of my congregation in Boston came and talked about that she'd worked with the Amish community after the aftermath of a mass shooting, and about how the Amish community responded. And from that discussion, we very quickly moved into what would it take to truly know forgiveness in our own lives. How would you have the vision and the courage to make such a thing happen? And the same old guidance that said, against human nature, that there is a better way that is lived in the human but is beyond us. And if it's true in history, then it may be true in any private hell we might experience. It is very human not to forgive. totally understandable, completely understandable. But it's not the best way. And so why does this kind of reconciliation matter? Sometimes it's not really for the benefit of the person who is being forgiven. I know that sounds odd to say. Now, it's good when it happens. It's transcendent when it happens. But I think that I need to be honest with you and say, that's not ultimately the point. Well, what is the point? That all these resentments and hurts and very resilient pain they create a weight upon the heart. There's a very great cost to carrying that kind of weight within us. It's justified, absolutely justified. But one way or another, it becomes a profound anchor upon our soul. And I've come to believe that that weight is more than just weighing us down. It's actively corrosive. And again, I don't say this lightly or blithely. That kind of heavy rust begins to gather about our heart so that it can hardly beat. So what do? Well, we find that latent power which seemingly lies beyond us, and we forgive, and the weight goes away. Forgiveness attempts to clear and cleanse that inward gunk and junk and binding coating, just so we can breathe again. Like forgiveness, in that sense, it's not really for the other. Although sometimes when it happens, it is amazing and freeing to witness, or for us to even be on the receiving end of forgiveness. But forgiveness in this sense is ultimately really to save ourselves. Yes, we are the true recipients of this kind of healing, so that we can go on with our lives, that we can set down the burden that was holding us back, that was quite literally holding us prisoner, which leads to, I can't forgive because I can't forget. And that's true, it's fine, it's human. But forgiveness does not entail forgetting. Not really. Because forgiveness can feel impossible, but really the element of it that is the impossible part is the forgetting. And luckily, for you and for me, forgetting is not really the essence of what I'm talking about today. Because you won't forget. You won't. But you can forgive, and part of that power is that while the memory stays and even stings, its strange power over us may, in time and meditation and in communion with others, ebb away. But this only happens when forgiveness in its essence comes into play. In fact, not only is forgetting not possible, I would submit that true forgiveness only works when it's grounded in the reality of the relationship you have with someone, which is your shared history. And there's nothing flowery in this. This is absolutely real stuff. And you can say, well, I can't forgive because the person who hurt me won't ask for forgiveness or wouldn't even recognize it if I gave it. Or perhaps that the reach of forgiveness is beyond because the person is gone, is dead. Trust me, forgiveness is not wasted when extended to someone who is not even capable of understanding forgiveness. I have seen in my own ministry, across the years, over and over, the profound effects of such reconciliations, but that's not the point. And I would never say that such reconnections and moments of a startling change in people's relation to one another aren't beautiful and profound. But forgiveness is not dependent upon that, not really. For forgiveness is not just about healing oneself, it's also about somehow, in a way we can't fully understand, healing the world around us in which we find ourselves. You and I didn't ask to be born. And there's a mystery that our days go into, even beyond life. There's so much we don't understand. But I do think this. When we forgive, we are tapping into something quite beyond our human capacity, into something that helps move us beyond the inhumane. Beyond the specifics of your life, to be able to think more vastly, more comprehensively, to truly love, as the ancient Greeks would have it, agape, which is not personal love, but a love that holds us. And it doesn't take too long, if you want to think this way, to reach a realization that our world, what would it be like if we could not forgive? It would be unyielding. It would be stiff, immovable. A world without forgiveness is a desert. It is a dry place. Without love's capacity to change us, to act as a oil, not just of healing, but literally an oil to help our pieces and our elements of our life move. To shift past the stifled and locked-in hatreds and resentments that don't allow us to move on. And if we can find that bit of freedom and forgiveness, and that's what it is, ultimately it is the freedom of your heart. Think for a moment. In your own life, when you, against all expectations, and certainly against justice, you have been forgiven, just think about what that felt like. What did it do to you? What was unlocked and what was freed in you? What was opened? And to not offer that to another human being is to not take up the most incredible capacity that you can have to extend beyond the realm of justice, even of fairness, even of the rational. Be able to touch mercy. Because love without mercy is not love. And to struggle here, and it is a struggle, and to reach that high and holy summit of human life. Is any of this easy? Of course it isn't. It can't be. But somehow we know it's possible because we've seen it all of our lives. I see it in the life of this congregation all the time. And you are never alone in reaching for that summit, that high vista, where you see further than you've ever seen before. And lastly, that the greatest reconciliation, the deepest atonement, is being reconnected to the self you were born to be. Amen. I invite forward Gwen to take our chalice and ask you to rise and say words with me that are found in your order of service. Carry forth this chalice flame, its illumination into our daily lives, its sustaining warmth into our relationships, the light of reason shining beyond these walls. May we carry the fire of hope in our hearts this day and in the week to come. You know the song well. It's 108. My Life Flows On, an English song. 108. Flows on, an endless song above earth's limitation. I see the real fine and the new creation. And now the day goes endless ride. Soul, how can I keep from singing? I'm clinging, since love prevails in heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing when tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near? How can I keep from singing to prison cell and dungeon vile? Our thoughts to them are winging, when friends by shame are undefiled. How can I keep from singing? Now may peace, which passes all understanding, keep your hearts and minds in the knowledge of love. May this peace be yours this day, this glorious day. Amen. Go in peace.